So welcome to today's webinar. All of us who are online, we have over 60 people dialing in. I can see more joining. We had lots and lots of people signing up, and that's a sign that engaging on this topic of nurturing deep tech startups is something of interest. Today we are hosting Professor Prabhu, who is joining us from India in IIT Madras. We've had some relationship with IIT Madras, and in particular with Prabhu, who is one of the advisors of some of the programs that we're running for deep tech startups here in Kenya. I can tell that we have participants from very many backgrounds, from universities, from innovation hubs, from government settings, from research institutions, young and old. So I'm here to introduce Prabhu first. And Prabhu is a professor at IIT Madras, and IIT is one of the leading universities in India. And prior to joining IIT Madras, Prabhu worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the Imperial College London, where he developed hybrid modeling techniques for ultrasonic inspection of wells on a Rolls-Royce funded project. While in the UK, he served as a co-consultant to companies including Bayer Systems, British Energy Limited, and Fraser Nash Consultancy. He's currently a principal investigator in one of the projects for nuclear industry and has been involved in a number of international projects as part of his academic career. His interests of expertise in that matter include guided ultrasonic inspection, modeling elastic waves, phenomena, and analysis of wave scattering. But I don't know Prabhu in this regard as I looked at his bio on the website. I have known Prabhu in the context of being involved in startups, coaching, mentoring, nurturing startups. And many people in Kenya actually know Prabhu in that context. And I would rather he speaks about himself in that regard other than the engineer that his bio speaks about. So we will do that. He will give a short intro of himself, and then he will make a presentation. And this presentation will go a little deeper into research-based ventures and deep tech. And then we'll have some kind of questions, which I'll post to him after about 15 minutes or thereabout. And then we'll open it up for people who may have questions, in which case you can post them on WhatsApp as soon as now and as we go on. And hopefully we'll pick a range of some of the questions that he can answer. And please, Prabhu, as you introduce yourself, proceed to speak to us about your upcoming role in Africa. Over
Yeah,
to you, Prabhu.
sure. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony. And I must say that bio was quite dated. So I don't know who prepared it. So that they must have taken that from IIT Madras website, which
Yes.
I have not updated for a while actually. So, but as you rightly said, a lot of how you know me is what I have done since. So I'm going to talk about all of that. And I'll give a presentation for about 10 minutes on some of this kind of stuff, which is essentially translational research, maker spaces, and all of that within this context of deep tech startups and how to nurture them. So I've been heading our School of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Under the school, we have a maker space. We also have a pre-incubator. And the school is sort of like an amalgamation, all of this that's just come up recently. But I've been doing this role for the last 5 years. Um, I'll go forward. So my core research is in sensor technologies for infrastructure management. And both in Africa as well as in India, we have new infrastructure coming up at a very rapid pace. And we also have existing infrastructure that needs to be maintained. And this infrastructure can be physical or digital. And by infra, what I mean is things like roads, pipelines, ports, terminals, containers, tanks, um, airfields. So these are all physical infrastructure that needs to be maintained, and that's my area of research. Of course, I primarily am interested in the technological aspect of solutioning, but of course, there is aspects of socio-economics, also policy in solving the problems overall. and I don't mind engaging with all of that. So this is my only slide on research, and you should still believe me if that I'm a professor. So my core research is into ultrasonic guided waves, as Tony introduced. I've worked on wave propagation in complex materials, also wave guiding by complex media, and has particularly specialized into what we call as ultrasonic metamaterials. So these are engineered materials with which we can overcome natural limitations of ultrasound. On the other hand, I've also worked extensively with robotics, trying to take these sensor innovations to remote locations. So that's the one slider, on my core research. On the other hand, I've worked very closely with universities across the world, also with colleagues within IIT Madras across different departments, colleagues from electrical engineering, from ocean engineering, and also computer science and materials. Internationally, I have had strong collaboration in Europe because, of course, I did my PhD from Imperial College, but also, a lot of collaboration with the US. And you will also be, happy to note that I have one African collaboration listed here, which is in terms of University of Nairobi. But there is more linkages. Today, through KeNIA, I'm connected to over 20 universities. We also have inked an agreement with four universities, which include Dedan Kimati, Riara, and Dar es Salaam in the East African region. Of course, my research is very, industry oriented. So
This
this
is
doesn't have to be.
fantastic, buddy.
Thank you. So, but this is something I would like to highlight and emphasize that a lot of what is to follow in terms of technology translation and startups originates from this, right? So we have been working with some of the best industries across the world, uh, and it so happens that sensor technologies are applied in various domains. So we are a little bit fortunate here, but I cannot emphasize enough that industrial collaboration is the foundation of translational research. So we are grateful to have colleagues like
George, did we lose Prabhu?
Yeah, we lost Prabhu. I'm on his WhatsApp right now.
Okay. Maybe for the benefit of the rest, we are hosting this as a Kenya National Innovation Agency, largely because we want to keep exposing people as much as we can.
Can you
Yes, I
hear
think
me?
Prabhu, you're back. You have a little bit of challenges on the connection. We lost you.
Yeah, so I'm shifting to mobile internet. I came out of the broadband, which tends to be unstable in the building I am in. So I was on this slide with our colleagues. I hope this you are able to see. Are you all able to see this now?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. So I was just acknowledging the support of similarly motivated colleagues. And today we have also corporatized our own lab. So we have a CEO and a set of administrative staff as well as postdocs who are helping us to deliver world quality fundamental research, fundamental science. And yeah, as several of our faculty members, including myself, have gotten engaged in different sort of roles, particularly within startups, having a corporatized structure in the lab has been beneficial. These are some of the areas that I've been working on. I'll not get into that, but just to highlight that sensor technologies, but at the cutting, disruptive end of things. And I cannot fail to again emphasize that deep science-based, startup and translation ultimately is down to very good science. And this is reflected, for example, I've graduated 15 PhD students and 22 masters by research students over the years, and about 120 masters, taught masters with a final project as well. So all of this is the research base that ultimately gets translated into startups. If you see these graduates, about a third of them are in academia, a third of them are in multinational companies, and a third of them are with startups. A few of them my own startups as well. That brings me to my role working with young people. So I've always enjoyed working with students and motivating them to start up and see them mature into experienced startup founders. Here are different pairs of students you see, uh, and I'll speak about some of these startups as well. These are all my own startups, and these are all my own students as well. Upon graduation, of course, you will see one industry stalwart here. He's not my student, but he was a visitor to our group here. So today I'm associated with 9 startups overall. I pulled that slide out, and I'm going to talk about a few of them as we go forward. The first startup that I'm going to talk about is Planis. It was created about 10 years ago. It started off with a final year master's project by Tanuj, who's on this slide here. And you see the robot he created is a picture which has a annotation A. So that was the first robot that was created in our lab, and it is named after my PhD supervisor, Mike Love. And it was a robot created to visually inspect underwater structures. Over the years, we have developed ultrasonic underwater inspection using pulsed eddy current delivered by robots. We have also developed AI-based inspection for marine structures. On the top right, you have a robot that is inspecting a container tank, and on the bottom right, you have a marine drone. And this is a robot that we are developing for the Indian Navy. And so all of this has been possible only because there has been a dedicated team focused on translating that original IP from our lab in terms of underwater pipeline inspection. Today, the startup has over 200 employees, and with operations in across the world. We have offices in 4 different locations within India. We have offices in the Middle East, which is within Qatar, Oman, and UAE and Saudi. We have wholly owned subsidiaries in Netherlands as well. And so this is one of my oldest and I would say the most successful company coming out of our lab. Today, this company is valued at 50 million USD. So that's how the value has created and grown. Um, and the next startup I would like to talk about is slightly different. Zyma was created out of my core research in waveguide ultrasonics. Remember, this is the my area of my PhD. This is also the area of PhD of the group head of our lab. And also today, about 5 students from our lab who are PhDs are in this company. It's very deep tech. So this is a just as a cheese and chalk contrast. Planes came out of a master's project, essentially an undergraduate sort of project with originally very little IP, but the company has grown with a lot of IP over the years. But Zyma was created at the start itself with over 12 IPs, 6 of them US granted patents, and the IPs are all on how we send sound through acoustic waveguides. Like you have fiber optics, you have fiber acoustics here, and how we figure remote in environmental parameters. And today, this company is also located across the globe with projects in the Middle East and in Europe as well as US. This company is valued at 10 million today, and we have raised a couple of series rounds as well. It's gone up to Series A. Now we are looking at Series B, raising Series B anytime soon. Solinas is a socially relevant startup. Similar to Planis, this also started off as a final year master's project, but this is a different type of company because this is focused more on livelihoods, climate change, resilience, trying to maintain water and sewer infrastructure, trying to create septic tanks, the operation of septic tanks humane so that people don't enter them. So it's a different type of startup and it has a different growth cycle as well compared to the other two, which are purely industry focused. And the final startup I would like to close with is Plenome, which is more recent. This is a startup on blockchain-based record management, which can occur in healthcare and it can also occur in the context of other sensitive applications such as voting, defense, and so on. So this is a purely information technology software, whereas the other 3 companies were hardware. This is an IT company. Just to show you that we have experience in this kind of domain as well. Very recent, but we have already raised Series A, sorry, pre-Series A, and the company is looking to start making revenues anytime soon. So now my engagement with startups is growing. Just in the last 1 year alone, I have participated in the creation of 4 startups. This is one of them, right? So we have been working with robotics, and that work has expanded now into general purpose foundation models for various types of robots. And this was a startup created by somebody from a different IIT, but they came and associated with me, and I became a co-founder in this startup. We are looking at another startup trying to measure flow in pipelines using machine learning. And overall, within our group, and this is not just my startups, but from the list of 8 colleagues I showed you, we have created about 16 startups in the last 15 years. And I would credit that largely to that slide I showed you on, which is in terms of industry collaborations and also international linkages. So today, because of this kind of translational research, our group alone has presence across the world. You see this heat map of where our startups are working today. And this is just half the number of startups I showed you. And with the help of those, we can deliver solutions across the 4 continents of the world. So I'll stop here so that we can go with a further into the further leg of discussions. So essentially, my message so far has been, deep science with an intent of translating it, working together with industry has led us to startups. To me, as a scientist, why I am into startups is the possibility of taking our solutions and delivering them as actual products on the field and not just creating IPs or writing journal papers, which I have done a plenty as well. Today, I've written about 110 journal papers. I alone have 45 granted IPs in my name. But not stopping at that, trying to go forward is what has been motivating me. Just one more slide before we start with the next set of discussions is, our School of Entrepreneurship, which I started with. Um this is actually, one of the reasons why we are able to do all of this. Of course, we have a lab, we have faculty members who want to translate research, but we also have an enabling ecosystem, which is in terms of a maker space. We have incubators, we have industry partnerships, we have investors who are working together with us. Just to give an idea of the power of this network, just in the last year, IIT Madras has been able to put out 103 deep tech startups. At the start of 2024, our director gave me a challenge. He said, "Can you create 100 startups a year?" So we said, "Game on, let's take this challenge on." And by summer 2025, we put out 103 startups, of which 20% came out of our pre incubator. So that's the ecosystem that we are part of. And therefore, we are able to create startups. Today, an idea to a startup for us takes 2 years' time. So that's the kind of speed with which we are able to put ideas out into products. And I'll pause here for for our further discussions. Also, this is the career path, and I'll flash this and we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. Prabhu. I think it's always encouraging and exciting to listen to you, and also not only would you speak some of these things conceptually, but you also speak them, practically based on some of the experiences you had. And I can see people really appreciating the success that you've had. I will somewhere along the way try to find out how supportive the environment is and how your self-drive has also contributed to this success. But first of all, let me try to understand a foundational issue here. What do you mean by deep tech startup, and how is that such a startup different from what you may consider any other type of startup?
Sure. Thank you for that question. Um, Yeah, I think what is deep tech has been debated around, and I think you have a different name for this. You say deep research or deep science-based startup. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you have another
That's
name,
correct.
but the name deep tech has really caught on in India. And I would say we at IIT Madras literally coined this word. I think about 10, 12 years ago, we sort of popularized this term. And what we mean by this is, startups that rely um, on IP that has been generated based on years and years of science. So, for example, I spoke to you about Zyma. This is a company that is delivering waveguide ultrasonic thermometers. It is not easy for anybody to just get in and do that because It is backed by expertise from myself. I have a 20-year, career in guided ultrasonics. Head of our group, he has a 30-year or 40-year career in guided ultrasonics. 5 PhDs in our lab, who are all part of the company. 16 IPs, 6 US granted patents. So it's not going to be easy for anybody to come tomorrow and create this startup. So
Mhm.
it's taken years and years, a lot of deep expertise, a lot of IP. And so that's what we understand as a deep tech startup, something that is based on a lot of research and a lot of innovation, a lot of innovation quotient built up over a period of time, such that it is not easy for anybody else to replicate, whatever is the core offering of that startup. That's what we call as deep tech. I
Mhm.
hope that was conveyed clearly.
That helps. So if I have intellectual property, I mean, like I've protected what I have, and maybe I've been involved in research for the last 2 years or thereabout. Um, would you still consider that? Because I'm looking at, you've mentioned years and years. So
Yeah.
would you still consider that as a deep tech startup?
So deep tech, I think, is an intent.
Mhm.
The other example I gave you is of Planis. That Planis was created 10 years ago. And when we started, there was very little deep IP there. So of course, we could create an underwater robot. But people would say, so what? Underwater robots have been around for 30 years. So what is it that you are innovating here on? But that has happened over a period of time. So we have created a lot of IP around, propulsion. We have created IP around underwater illumination. We have created IP around underwater inspection, sensor technologies. All of that has happened over a period of time. So definitely the IP, upon which you base your company upon, uh, it can evolve because IP is a series of things. There can be an original IP, there can be an add-on IP. As long as you're protecting it with some very deep expertise, I think that qualifies you as a deep tech. And you need not originally start off with a very strong IP, but definitely there should be an expertise to deepen that IP base.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, thanks very much. Now, we talk a lot about technology readiness levels, and that has become a global framework for assessment of maturity levels of startups, which then informs many decisions, including fundraising, partnerships, joint venture building, and so on and so forth. Could you relate TRL levels and deep tech startups, and what are some of the things to think about as the maturity levels grow for deep tech startups?
Thank you again. I think it's a beautiful question. So, um, the way I would answer is that deep tech startups will have a network of IPs. So there are some IPs that are showing a proof of concept. That means you're going to
Mhm.
TRL3, and that itself may have taken the researchers several years to get. There might have been a lot of investment that has been done through grant research, through government agency funded investigation. All of that has gotten you to TRL3, which is proof of
Mhm.
concept. So that's what is making you deep tech. It's not easy for somebody else to come and replicate that because there's a lot of expertise, a lot of investment that has gone into it. But you also have a network of IPs because when you go from TRL 4 to 6 and 7 to 9, it's more about field deployment, right?
Mhm.
It's more about mock-up. It's more about getting results in as realistic situations as possible. And that happens over a period of time. So it is this network that is making it a deep tech startup. So fundamentally, uh, tough to cross sort of threshold to get to proof of concept, and then a lot of applied patents which are connected to that particular proof of concept is what is making it deep tech.
Okay. Thanks very much. Now, let's move on to something else in terms of the support system that you see or you consider as a bare minimum
Yeah.
including the roles of universities, the role of private sector, the role of agencies like innovation agencies in fostering this deep tech startup. What has been your experience and set of recommendations on this?
Yeah, so that's very important point. So when we come to investors, or anybody who is seeking return on, their faith on a particular startup, definitely we are looking for exponential multiplications, right? So people typically in the VC world, they say they want 3x kind of a return at an angel stage, 5 to 10x return at a, institutional stage. Now, this is where deep tech starts to get challenging because it takes a while before we build very deep, defendable IPs within the deep tech domain. So, take quantum for example. Right? It's going to take a lot of time for you to build a defensible IP within the quantum space. Or sensor technologies. It's taken, let's say, 3 PhDs before you get to that point where you have a very defensible kind of IP. Take my own startup Planis, for example. When we created the company, there was not much deep tech defensible IP, but now we have created a range of underwater sensor technologies, for example underwater Schmidt hammer or underwater pulse velocimetry, which is our own IP. But it has taken a lot of years to get there, and this is where typically investors, unless they are configured that way. So, for example, there are certain institutional investors who expect returns in 10 years. So, in India, funds are registered either as 5+2 or 7+2. That is, the original period is 5, extendable by 2 years, or it is 7 years fund, extendable by 2 years. So, but typically for deep tech, perhaps you need funds that look at 10 years plus two, so that you can give returns to your investors in that kind of time period, or even 7+2 would be perhaps a practical choice. But what about other investors? For them, they really cannot wait until that long, and that is where the role of government and agency becomes very important. Governments have to recognize that deep tech is going to create a lot of deep value. When you cross that hockey stick, for example, with ultrasonic thermometers now, we are going to market where there is no competition.
Um,
Absolutely,
I
just
I'm
no
just
competition.
wondering. I'm just wondering
Yeah.
whether it is us who are having a connection challenge or it is on your end because clarity is fading and also your audio is breaking. Is that
I
the
am able to
same
hear
case,
you.
George, for you?
Yeah, I think it's Prabhu's side. The video is
I
destabilized a
am
little bit,
able
but we
to
can still
hear
hear
you
you.
all very well. Are you able to hear me well?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you, but your audio keeps breaking. It started getting a little worse, and also your image is also getting blurred.
Yeah, so I have sort of removed my video. I hope it's clearer now.
Yeah, definitely it gets better.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I was saying that, shall I repeat the point on the agency participation and so on?
Yeah, yeah. The question we were looking into is, the role of universities and agencies in
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
mechanisms. Yeah.
So, up to the point where a company starts to get exciting for investors, it is the role of, I would say, the universities and the agencies and the grant bodies to support deep tech startups. Now, this is not how universities or agencies typically look at their mandate as, because the agencies or universities typically would say, "Oh, my mandate is to support, fundamental innovation, advancement of science purely for altruistic purposes, create open source, create, write in journal papers," and typically all grants would be looking at something like that. But increasingly, it's clear for both universities and agencies that deep tech is a gold mine. If you manage to create a startup that's very unique, very deep science based, you're going to create valuation, multiplications that are, impossible in a conventional startup. Say, for example, you're making a, soap startup, or, you have an app delivery startup. Here, the growth is, linear. You're going to grow at the rate at which your business grows. But in deep tech, your valuations can be astronomical increases, 50x, 100x, 1000x. So these kind of multiples are possible. Recognizing this, agencies and governments, should try to support startups in those early stages where they are creating that deep IP base. And here, what is the return for the university or the agency? If they hold equity, that equity's value is going to go up over a period of time. And in anticipation of that, they have to support startups in this early phase. And how many years, do they need to support? This can vary from area to area, but definitely 3 to 5 years is something that people have to look at. And here you have to look at these startups also as ways of bringing back returns for the universities or for agencies, ultimately leading to sustainability, right? So, and we have to liberalize the way we have to look at our startups and not look at the. Of course, this is going to be individuals who is going to become rich at the end of this, but the organizations are also going to get rich, and that essentially is about the startup culture, right? So it is. Yeah, I hope I have driven that point home well enough. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, it's great. So I'm going to open up also to take some questions from the audience. I can see several questions that are being posted, and I'm sure we won't be able to run through all of them. But at least here we have created a contact we can always leverage, and also this appetizes people in terms of wanting to pursue more insights into this area. My last question for you is the opportunities that you see for investment or investors, and how to guide and help the investment ecosystem in terms of the return cycles that they can expect. While addressing that question, you also could help pointing to how universities and agencies can catalyze the connections between investors and founders who are working on deep tech.
Sorry, I missed that question for a bit, Tony.
Okay, so the question is around the investment and
Yeah.
investors, and there
Yeah.
are several angles to that question. One perspective is what expectations investors should have in deep tech startups, number one. Number two, in terms of the return cycles. And then the second one is in how universities, and partly because I've seen lots and lots of universities on this webinar, um, I see heads of institutions, I see heads of departments and heads of hubs, how they can attract more investors into their ecosystem so that then they can direct them to startup founders and such like.
Yeah. So, firstly, in terms of return cycles, um, it is very typical for at least to wait for at least 5 years to get a 5x multiplier in a deep tech startup, I would say. A hockey stick kind of a growth can happen between 5 to 7 years. This has been my observation. Of course, it depends on area to area. AI, for example, these days people are building 2 billion startups at seed stage. So that has sort of inflated the pattern. But normal deep tech, I would say 3 to 5 years to get a good return, and then 5 to 7 years to get a hockey stick kind of a multiplier. That's the first
Mm-hmm.
part. Um, in terms of universities attracting VCs, I think we need to create examples. So for us at IIT Madras, the biggest example has been a company called Aether Energy, right? Aether is our first IPO. I don't know if I have a slide on that. Yeah, it's here. So the red bike that you see, the photograph of that at the center, was India's first electric bike company. This company was incubated at IIT Madras 12 years ago, based on an IP that a couple of our alumni generated. They came back to the lab of their professor and created an IP on a fast charging electric battery. And then they decided there is not much market for batteries, and so they designed a e-bike around it, and that became India's first electric bike company. This company went IPO just a couple of months back. So they are our first, homegrown billion-dollar valuated company. And so our value in this company today is alone up to 12 million, actually, right? So our holding alone, and that's the kind of example that we need to create. The people who invested in Aether have all made very good money, as you can imagine. People who came in earlier, people who put in sorry, something like 5,000 USD or 10,000 USD have walked away with $1 million returns, actually. So for universities to be able to attract investors, the best way is to say back at start, identify really performing stars and back them. Of course, if you back 10 of them, you know that maybe a couple will really make it big, and that's what would be the strategy to attract investors.
Okay, then thanks very much. Now I'll just basically follow up based on some of the questions I am seeing on the chat. Ivy Joy is asking, so what happens when the duration set for return of funding has lapsed and the startup has not been able to scale as much and therefore cannot guarantee the return on investment? How do you navigate such experiences?
That's a challenging question. So what then happens is the investors in the fund, uh, they become shareholders in the company. So a fund, for example, let's say its life cycle is 7 years. In every fund, there is some lead investors, what we call as LPs and GPs, right? And the general partners and the lead partners. So in case there is a startup which is from which they have not been able to cash out by that time, there's two things. Either the fund can ask the startup to liquidate, if they are in a position to do that, and then the money is repatriated, or they become shareholders in the company and they become individual shareholders. That's one of the ways of handling this kind of situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I can see several other questions, and I'm really looking for one that speaks to your presentation specifically, so that we can make maximum use of your presence here, and then we can go and handle some of the local questions that are relating to some of the realities that we're dealing with here. But I think it'll be interesting to hear a little bit about your upcoming work in Africa. I'm very sure there are people who have heard about it and are curious to know. Could you just give a snapshot?
Uh, yeah, let's do that in a bit. Right, we'll take the other questions. Let's keep that towards the end. Is that okay?
Okay, okay. Now I see two more questions here. I hope there's some questions which are direct to me, and then some direct a little general enough. Okay, let me read this one. Deep tech innovation often takes years before it reaches market maturity. Yet in in economies like ours, the focus is on direct to consumer value. How can we reframe deep tech as a necessary foundation for Africa's future competitiveness rather than a distant luxury?
So, very good question. In fact, we have sort of also grappled with this in India, and it really, it's about whether you are looking for instant gratification or long-term value creation. Right. So I would say both are important, right? If you look at the Indian startup ecosystem today, um, I think it is really being driven by consumer startups, internet startups. With a population of 1 billion, clearly, if you have, a lot of revenue coming in, people are not worried about are you being profitable on a unit economics basis, are you being sustainable, and so on. Rather, they're looking at gross margins, gross value, GMV. That has become the yardstick by which you measure startup success. So startup growth, IPOs, and so on are being driven by that, which is important. I think I'm not saying that it is not important, but in in the long term, if you look at IP creation, if you have to look at, real wealth is, I would say, when, we are able to get in investment into the country, right? Not, if you create a lot of revenue, repatriate this income abroad, that's not real wealth creation, right? Real wealth is when money comes in and resides in the country. And that is going to happen when it is invested in, the country's indigenous IP, right? If you have an IP that is registered in whatever, Switzerland, Singapore, and so on, even though you are making a lot of revenue, ultimately that money is not staying in the country, right? And this is, for example, true for some of the biggest companies in India. These are companies that are doing very well. They're having a billion dollar, gross margin values and so on, GMVs. But these are companies that are registered in Singapore or in, Cayman Islands or whatever, because the IP belongs there. So even consumer startups, even startups do have IP, right? Those might be IPs that are, is not generated by us. So we will have to pay somebody else to be able to encash those kinds of technologies, actually. So for example, in communications, all of us are paying, to use our mobile phones. We are paying some amount of royalty to Samsung or Motorola or whatever, because that's where the original IP came from. So this is a misnomer for people to think that, oh, there's a consumer startup, I can run away with it, I'm making a lot of money. But actually, there is an IP here which is not ours, it's somewhere else. It is just that, it's so, atomized now that it doesn't show up to you as a big thing. On the other hand, deep tech is where the IP is located within that geography. It may take years, but that is real value creation because money is coming into the country. At least it is my perspective. I'm not an economist, so don't kill me, all the economists in the audience. But that's my thought process, and that's why I think deep tech has to be encouraged.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm going to take one more. I know we will be stopping at half past the hour. So we've got about 15 minutes, and we'll see how many more questions we can handle during that period of time. So one question by unknown user in this case, please explain the role of linkages. It's a little slow. Yeah, the role of linkages and partnerships in this process. And what are some of the other enabling environment for the same from your experience? I think he's looking at linkages and partnerships in their support mechanisms in the maturity levels of these deep tech startups.
I'm not able to understand what they mean by linkages and mechanisms. Sorry.
Yeah, I think he's interested in appreciating the role of linkages and partnerships. Here I am building my tech startups. We've talked about agencies, we've talked about universities, but I think the person asking this question is interested in building the right linkages and partnerships in supporting the growth of their venture.
So I would think perhaps they are talking about industrial linkages and also academic partnerships. I can only speak from my experience. Just yesterday, this weekend, we conducted an industry meeting where about 50, representatives of leading companies in the oil and gas, nuclear, and energy space were at IIT Madras. And one of the themes of this meeting was showcasing technologies from our lab. So the 16 startups I spoke to you, 12 of them were showcased to them. Now, these 50 companies that came are all part of our network. They are either, somebody who I have worked with, or Professor Krishnan has worked with, or Professor Balaji has worked with. And now, what did they walk away with? They didn't walk away with some of the, quantum papers that I have written. They walked away with the fact that there are solutions available from our lab that they can deploy on their premises, right? And they go back and they come back and speak to these startups and say, hey, can you come and do a pilot for me? Can you do this particular implementation for me, and so on. So when you talk about startups and you want to grow the business, the industry linkages become very important. And for industries, if I go and vouch for a startup, it becomes interesting for them, because otherwise there is 100 startups on the field. They don't know who to trust, who to believe in, who to give a job to. Now, if I vouch for it, because I have a certain credibility, they then believe in the startup, and maybe the pilot happens much faster. So that's our experience in terms of industrial linkages. The second thing is, similarly, when we go international, for example, some of the first openings in many of our startups have come from our links, right? So if, for example, I go to the UAE and present my work to a company there, the trust factor there is more challenging, right? So even in big companies have a challenge in trying, a startup. So now, in a foreign territory, that's going to be even more. And so where the credibility, for example, if I already knew somebody there, then the university and the professor's credibility comes into the picture, and they can say, okay, look, I know this guy, I've worked with him for many years. This is a credible institution. The startup that they are backing is probably has a solution that's worth trying out. It's not that they're going to give a purchase order immediately. At least they'll be willing to try it out. And this is how linkages help. And this is how linkages help, grow deep startups. I hope I've answered the question.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much for your time. I'm going to take two questions now. I see that are already online. Um, One is just position yourself, and I'm paraphrasing this. I'm not reading the question as this, but position yourself as having an opportunity to head an institution that has been heavily teaching and research. And there is some meaningful research outputs that are coming out of this. And you're trying to create an enabling environment for deep tech startups to thrive. Um, what are some of the things that you would do to ensure that the institution grows in terms of its structures, in terms of its connection with multi-stakeholders, and catalyzing collaborations for deep tech startups to thrive?
So there are three things I usually say in this context. So for deep tech startups to thrive, one is, we need to have strong industry linkages and partnerships and connections. So definitely, I would encourage my faculty members to engage with industry. Now, this is a tricky subject because a lot of universities would like to have their faculty members engage with pedagogy first, teaching and student supervision. That's the first. I agree. But if we can enable industry partnerships, industry can come and pose problems, and faculty are encouraged to work on those problems. I think that's the first step, I would say, because that gives us access to the market and try to understand what is the problem that is of interest to the industry or the end user. The second thing I would say is a culture of building, because startups are ultimately about building. It's not about conceptualizing. Although you are great at disseminating concepts, we need to go beyond that and be able to make something out of visualizations. So instead of building that, and the third, instead of starting. So right. So and that's the thing I would foster. So in terms of intelligence, culture of building.
Um, Seems we are
I hope I've
losing.
answered that question really.
Are we losing? Rabu, you can hear me? I think the network on your end.
Yeah, I think mobile internet, when somebody calls me, things go, but it's better now,
Ah,
right?
okay, okay. Um, have you done with that, or you still have something to
Yeah,
say?
done.
Because
You
I'll
can.
ask
Yeah,
you one
done, done.
more, and then I'll hand it over back to the coordinating team.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one. I think I see two questions. One of them, of course, is an innovator who is working on a startup that they call Sunrise Innovations Limited, and is on to. And I'll read it. And she said, as someone deeply experienced in nurturing frontier technologies, what advice would you give to a deep tech founder like us who are developing an AI-powered dashcam and EV telematic solutions, especially when it comes to moving from prototype to a scalable commercialized solution within our landscape?
Yeah. So I would usually answer that with saying that be conscious of IP, but
Yeah.
AI is a challenge because what AI is also a challenge. There's very little IP. These have all the original systems. We are all using, fine-tuning the same models and so on. But what I would like to say is at least work on a uniqueness, something that is very difficult for somebody else to come and copy, and that uniqueness can through implementation model, can be innovative business, it can be that's very unique. So these are the kinds of things. So for example, it's digitally when they started, of course, they were very different from everybody else, but it's really pretty replicable. You have read the
Yeah, I think the network has really gone.
recognition processes.
Yeah.
Let me. Is that better now?
Yeah, let's try.
Is
I
it
mean, let's
better
try. I
now?
think we're almost there.
Yeah. So say a lot of Amazon's success is actually down to Amazon processes, which is internally how do they manage people, how do they manage materials, how do they manage warehousing and so on. So some kind of uniqueness is very important in deep tech startups. That would be my message. Yeah.
Great. I think we've covered some good ground. I can see 163 people participating online, which means, we've had an opportunity to engage quite a broad audience in this regard. I see people who are faculty members, I see researchers on the call, I see students, I see institutional leaders, I see partners who are active in this area. And as we bring this to a close, our intention, of course, as the Kenya National Innovation Agency, is to continue to strengthen partnerships, expose, enhance awareness, build the necessary collaborations that would strengthen has also called me here. And as time goes by, we believe we're building a stronger innovation ecosystem, and we're looking for ideas on how we can add value. For this webinar series, we used to have it fairly often, but slowed down a little bit. But our intention right now is to run a webinar every month. Because we believe, as part of our broader innovation agenda, we need to keep demystifying, exposing, and continue to improve what we can. And thank you very much all for participating. Until next time, my name is Tony Mwansa, currently serving as the CEO of Kenya National Innovation Agency, and have a good one.
So there is one point I want to make finally, Tony, is about my participation in Africa. So to all of you, just 2 minutes. IIT Madras has its campus in Zanzibar in Tanzania. This is our the first international campus, and I am soon taking over as the director in charge there, or which is equivalent to a vice chancellor there. So I do hope to engage more closely with all of you, and will be very happy to work with all of you in taking deep tech and notch further up in the region. So that's what Tony had asked me about earlier, and I thought it would be good to say that towards the end.
Great. I think that's reasonable, and we look forward to working with you more closely. I've just finished up a meeting with the network of entrepreneurial institutions, the program that I mentioned to you, where we're rallying as many universities as possible, and we're trying to make it as regional as we can in terms of driving the entrepreneurial spirit. And we look forward to working with you as you settle down. And we also know that you have close links to Kenya, and so we will leverage that as well.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Indeed. Have a good one.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening, all of you. Thank you. Bye.